welcome everybody to the next edition of this PilsenPod. R.I.P. Pilsen, I think is the name. It's just kind of been rolling off the tongue today.
And we just thought about this right now.
You know, wearing black.
Yeah, we're all wearing black. We noticed we're all wearing black.
Except for Tommy.
Except Tommy, he's very nice and happy. And joining us, we have a special guest, Tommy Reyes. I don't know, Tommy, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Tommy Reyes.
Tommy
He's
Reyes.
Like, I don't know how I ended up here.
So
what do you want to know?
Okay, so
Everything.
We want to know everything, and I think it's a good way to start it off. But as we recap, Teresa, myself, Javier, we all grew up here, and we're adding another homegrown Pilsenite, Tommy J. Reyes. If you don't know, now you know.
And if you didn't know, Tommy J. Reyes has been our curator for Pilsen Arts and Community House. So we have been working collaboratively to be exhibiting the amazing artists that we have had over the past year and a half almost.
Yeah.
But yeah, you actually kind of wandered in here one day. So that's why it's like, how did I end up here? And then we were like, we want to work together. Mm-hmm. And then we shared each other's story.
Yeah.
So we want to hear your story.
Yes.
Well, we'll get into that. I think
the
dirty word and the word and the topic that we're discussing is what today?
It's gentrification.
Let's all get it out. Gentrification.
Gentrification. Yes.
Say it.
Say it. We are not afraid. This is something we get asked all the time about. When people come in, they're like, yeah, what is gentrification? I think now it hasn't been as big of a subject just through our journey and being in Pilsen. I think we were asked that question a lot more a few years ago. Mm-hmm. Don't you agree? Like random people would come in and, what do you think about gentrification? And then you'd have to go through the whole story or how you felt, and I think that's something that changes day to day. But
so gentrification. So I just pulled up the exact definition.
Okay,
here.
Read it to
let's
us.
See if we agree with it.
Yeah, let's see if we agree with this definition. The process whereby the character of a poor urban area is changed by wealthier people moving in, improving housing and attracting new businesses, typically displacing current inhabitants in the process.
Wow, that's pretty spot on.
See?
So
what you?
I don't know. Where are we getting started, Javier? Do you want to kick us off?
Well, yeah, sure. Well, gentrification has, like you said, there's a lot of people have different thoughts on it. Some folks think it's a good thing. Some folks, of course, think it's not a good thing. Definitely, it's displacing a lot of our families, and from what we know on its long-time Pilsen residents, it's changing a lot of the fabric and the culture of what we grew up on, and some of us are still hoping and fighting to try to keep some of the resemblance what we grew up in. But I do understand we do need economic development in the community, especially a lot of us that have families that are rooted in the community, that came here and want to keep generational wealth in their family. So I understand those points as well.
So speaking of wealth and keeping wealth in the community, I think that's an important thing and an important topic. So I don't know, Tommy had some good examples of his family, his kind of family motto, right? And things that they've lived by. But I want to let Tommy speak on this.
Well, I think, for me, my family arrived here during that first wave of coming into Pilsen. So here was very Polish. So it was a Polish neighborhood when my family moved in. Pilsen has always been like a landing pad. So, my family followed migrant work. My grandfather came through, he landed in Pilsen. They figured this seems like a good enough neighborhood to, maybe plant some roots. So they were part of that first wave of people coming in the early 60s. And then the So like my grandmother opened a lunch counter, and then my grandfather continued to do work here and there where he could, and then they saved as a family, all of them. So I have like 13 aunts and uncles.
Oh, damn.
So
large family.
it was a big family, you know, and they all worked. You know, they worked the fields and they wanted a piece of the American dream, which was to own property. So that's what they did. They all worked together to buy here in Pilsen, and they still own.
Explain to folks what a lunch counter is, or your grandma started a lunch counter, because people might not know.
Oh.
I think, you know, back in the day, some people do.
Yeah, this
might
is
still
for the
remember,
millennials
but
that don't know nothing.
So my grandmother serviced. She fed the workers. So there were several RSOs here, single room occupancies, where migrant workers would come in. They would work factory jobs and things like that, and they would stay, and so they would pay a fee, and they would get breakfast in the morning, and they would get a bag lunch to take with them, and then they'd come back and have dinner. Mm-hmm. So they would pay like a fee for every day, and so that's how my grandmother made her money.
She's definitely
Just
an
on the food or
entrepreneur.
housing them as well?
No, just on the food. It was just a counter
Okay.
that, you know, like the men would come in. They would most of them were men, right? Because, you know, migrant workers were men, and then they would come in and they would have breakfast, and they'd take their lunch with them, and then they would come back for dinner. So that was her business.
Wow.
I think also you shared with us in the past how your grandmother was able to obtain property, which was really unique during that time.
Oh yeah,
So I would like you to share that.
So the big building that they own here was owned by a Polish guy, and what my grandmother did was a handshake deal. So she bought the building with cash on a handshake deal that she would like pay so much every month until the building was hers. So
That's like unheard of
Unheard
anytime
of, yeah,
at all
so-
anymore.
yes.
When you told me that story, I was like, what?
Yeah, so it was all based on a handshake deal, and then there was the business on the corner was a locksmith. So then one of my uncles decided to continue doing the locksmith, so he learned the trade, and so he opened his business in the same spot. So
Which is interesting because he bought it with the existing businesses, but kept that same business going.
Yeah.
So I think like those little things, those nuggets are like speak on why or how sometimes we're like upset or conflicted about gentrification, because for one, business minded, like it's already a successful business, so keep it going.
Right.
But also like being mindful as new developers buy properties and there's already existing businesses going on. Like that's always kind of an interesting conversation on like, do they push them out? Do they let them stay? You know, and things like that. So.
Yeah, but I don't think that. Well, my family's not developers.
No, but I'm just saying, like, you know, for whatever reason, he decided to keep it going, right?
Yeah, and I think the original reason why is because he was an apprentice there, and so when they sold the building to my grandmother, he just decided to continue on.
Yeah,
And
that was always a good spot too to get those difficult, tricky keys. Like they always knew how to make those keys there.
Yeah, that.
I kind of remember that when I'm going back into my childhood.
Up on 18th Place in Ashland.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
It'd been
pick-a-lock.
like that for forever.
But what is it now?
Now it's a dog grooming.
Oh, dog grooming. Keywords there, trigger words for
Yeah, but it's a dog grooming business owned by two immigrants coming in, opening their own business. So
right. So
it's,
those are the things.
But they're servicing, you know, the new people here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're servicing
The
both
affluent
the
or
new
just
and
new
old,
people?
The new and old.
Okay.
You know, everybody wants their dog groomed, so apparently they're doing great. And then
But
they
that's-
opened up a barber shop across the street.
But Tommy, that's one of the people, when people see like dogs and more dogs in the community, they identify that as part of gentrification.
I don't know why, because Pilsen has always been full of dogs.
Okay, but you know what?
Fancy dogs.
The size of the dogs have changed
If it's
drastically.
if it wasn't a pit bull,
If it wasn't a pit bull or a Rottweiler.
now we're seeing some some pretty shishi dogs out
I don't
there.
know.
Or
I
no?
don't know.
They're really
think,
small.
Mexicans in there, what they're
Chihuahuas and poodles.
Oh, they're definitely fur parents, and they have their fur babies.
Yeah,
But I think
so-
what was interesting for me when I moved back to Pilsen with my kids is seeing more people walking their dogs. When I grew up around here, like dog out, and you gotta let them out in the yard, in the front or the back. Like,
There's yards in Pilsen.
I don't.
Yeah, I
there-
know
there-
there
there's
were
some-
yards.
the little patch.
Oh,
of
the little
grass
patch in
ahead
front.
and
Yeah.
front, but
Okay.
I
No,
don't know.
I always remember dogs walking around and
No, like people walking their dogs. Yeah.
The old Mexican ladies walking their dogs, talking on the stoops,
I didn't.
gossiping, doing all
But I
that.
do-
That stuff I remember.
No, I do
seeing.
agree though. I mean, I agree both of you, but I do agree also with that though. I mean, honestly, everybody's walking their dog now. Like literally, me driving over here again, I saw maybe like 6 or 7 people walking their dog, really small dogs.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It looks like you got some stats, Javier. You want to read us some stats? We'll
Yeah.
have a little stat break.
Well, before I get into the stats, I just wanted to point with something that Tommy said, or I think it was you, Pablo, too, about here that want to stay here, that grandma and grandpa are still living there. They're on a fixed income. They are, just receiving their social security check, but they want to keep their building. They don't want to sell. I think there has to be something for people like that.
Oh, okay.
Oh, difference of
Oh,
opinion.
Tommy disagrees.
I think that's a very romantic tale.
Oh, okay.
But
Well-
not necessarily always true. I think that there are many families here who have been here because they bought when it was cheap, and now they're starting. Now they don't have to do anything to their building. They bought the building for $95,000, and now they can turn around and sell it for $500 without even lifting a finger.
Oh, yeah.
And then they can go buy something new for them and their families, which is what they do. I do believe that there are some families who want to stay and who feel like they want to stay, and there's nothing keeping them from not staying. I mean, as long as you pay, you pay your city taxes and stuff. I mean, yeah, taxes go up, but that's just the way it is. If you want a clean street outside, you got to pay for that.
Do you? Oh, okay.
That's true.
You know, and so if you want more services, there are more taxes that go with those services. I mean, you can't just say I want more services, but then who's going to pay for them? So it's just.
Yeah, the cost of living has definitely gone up.
Yeah, but the cost of living everywhere has gone up.
But our wages aren't going up.
Yeah,
with
but
the same.
that's always been a problem, though. Wages never go up with cost of living. So it's like,
Well, the wages and cost of living, that'll probably be another episode.
Which they should, right? They should go up with
But,
inflation.
as our journey in PilsenPod, I know Javier has gone out and talked to some of the small business owners that are trying to make it here in Pilsen. And I know Teresa and I and Tommy, we do share that tale in being a small business that have tried to, survive here in Pilsen. With these rates going up, these rental rates going up, right? The commercial real estate is also like gone through the roof. So in order for a business to survive, they need to make an insane amount of money or be doing something, that's not on the 100. But I don't know. Do you guys want to talk about that at all?
I mean, it took us a long time to even find the first location that we had. Obviously, I think our current, landlord is very conscientious about who they were going to have occupy the space and, take into consideration, the value of it has probably played a factor into, our rate. But it's hard. I mean, we hear stories from all kinds of folks that are struggling to find a space or even keep a space. That's what I got to say. But you you were up in Ravenswood for a while.
Well, yeah, that's where I started my gallery in Ravenswood, and the rent was very affordable.
But how far back was that when you first got that
What?
space?
9 years ago? 9 years? So my first location, I paid $600 for the rent.
Wow.
And then I wanted to double my square footage, which I did, and I paid $1,200. So I don't believe, yes, I know that it is difficult to start a business and to do all of those things, but I think that if a business doesn't, yes, there are new people coming in, you know, there are all these new things. Even when I was in Ravenswood changed. So Ravenswood was very young, hip, you know, I chose that location because of where the train was and it was easy to get to. And it wasn't like family oriented, it was very single professionals, you know, of all backgrounds, because Ravenswood was very mixed at the time.
Yeah.
And then when what was it? So it was like 6 years in, I started noticing the neighborhood changing to all families, just straight families who are not interested in purchasing art. They've got kids and everything. So the neighborhood itself gentrified again. The whole population changed just because they want, just because that's the nature of a neighborhood in Chicago. It always is in flux. There's always change. So that's why I have a problem sometimes with, you know, like, oh, we need to keep everything exactly the same, but that's never the answer. You know, I think that as a business here, I mean, like what? You think about Nueva Leon's Panderia. They're, you know, when they were here originally, they were just a straight on bakery, right?
Yeah.
Selling their conchas and tortillas and everything. But now they've shifted, right? They've added a TikTok video. They did their concha ice creams.
Yeah.
I mean, and how many people are they lining up for it down the street? Because they realize that they need to cater to not just the new white people who are moving into this neighborhood, but the millennial Mexicans who are moving into this neighborhood as well.
Yeah, and I think that's super interesting, right? Because our younger generations of Latinos, I feel like we're trying really hard to stay connected to our cultura with our modern day, right? And this fusion of like what you just described, even our local bakery, what they've done, feeds to that, literally.
Right, and
the restaurants too. I mean,
but you know what?
there's
There's a couple unicorns, but how many panaderias have closed?
Well,
how many?
El Nopal closed way before gentrification.
Yeah.
You know.
No, I don't think so. I think El Nopal. Well, that was those business. But you see, those businesses, that corridor,
15, almost
but
20 years
that
ago.
corridor kind of like.
They got plans for that corridor.
Yeah, but that corridor, right? People got priced out and they just got closed out.
Think that was
you don't think so?
No.
You don't think so?
People didn't get priced out. People just stopped shopping that corridor.
But why? I mean,
because
it
the
has
families
Casa
were
del
priced
Pueblo. I mean,
No. The reason why is because people stop it. People believe that when you're on Blue Island and you stop at the Casa del Pueblo Taqueria, there's nothing beyond it.
but besides like food establishments, let's think of all the art spaces, all the alternative spaces, all the t-shirt shops, all the small businesses that have tried over just in this last 8 years that we've been here.
What's terrible?
How many things have failed?
Terrible
No,
what?
everywhere in
terrible.
Pilsen.
No, I mean like if you're sticking to the corridor where you're talking about, I think that first I think it has a lot to do with location of where that neighborhood is, where that little section is.
Right, but that's the place that they're trying to develop now, right? Isn't that where I think Alderman Solis put in a lot of money? Probably Javier's going to have to back me up on this one. To that space, that intersection in Blue Island past El Milagro, where they've put in the new pavers by Benito Juarez, kind of like that area. I think a lot of money was dumped. Talk about being clean streets and everything.
Yeah.
So much money was dumped into that little intersection.
So that area.
Yeah, but that was because the alderman's office was over there.
So a lot of the infrastructure money
Right.
comes from the state of Illinois through the GA, the General Assembly. So, like for example, the redesign of Benito Juarez that happened a few years ago, that was in basically tied in together with a lot of those changes too that we see on 18th Street. It was just basically a flux of money that came from the state to make those changes. So I mean, Benito Juarez definitely needed the upgrade
For sure.
big time. I went there, so I know how it was back.
Did you go there before or after they've made the upgrade?
Oh no, before.
Okay.
Oh man, no. I went when.
So what is it like going over there now?
Oh, it's. I mean, I'm happy for the kids that go there because I mean, they have a whole. Don't they have like a whole like a theater thing or something for performing arts now in there? I mean, they really put money into that school, and I mean, I'm happy for the children that go there. What I've heard, I don't know if I'm right or wrong about this, is that the majority of the kids that go there are not necessarily from the area.
Because it's a magnet school.
It started changing.
It started
Yeah,
becoming
so
a
it's changing.
magnet school, and they had like an IB or some kind
It's
of.
an IB school now.
It is an IB, so
Yeah, well, there you go. I mean, I didn't know that. I was just told that a lot of the kids are not even from the neighborhood. So, I mean, I think that goes back to investments to our kids, especially when we were young, right? We didn't get those investments at all, and that's it's not an excuse of why a lot of us didn't necessarily succeed necessarily the way we were hoping to succeed, but it was challenging for us to definitely succeed in the school system here in Pilsen back in the 80s and 90s. Nobody cared about it. It's unfortunate.
So they say that artists bring forth gentrification, like they're the first gentrifiers. And since we have, 3 artists here on the panel, and Tommy has a lot of experience on this, is this something we agree with, or is this in this situation where artists and muralists and that movement was already here? Is that kind of something separate, or what do you believe?
I think Pilsen's obviously unique because there's already has been an existing creative community. So it's not like, it just started. I think it's a little bit different than, like on the north side, we've talked about Wicker Park in the past, where that was an affordable place for, artists to live, and they made it hip and cool. So I think, that kind of example is probably where that commentary has derived from in other areas as well. But I don't think Pilsen falls into that specifically because there's already been an artist community or creative community. What's interesting, right, is over the last 8 years or so, younger, newer artists are like, the community, I'm going to move there. And so then that's conflicting, right? Because it was already here, but then you have a wave of, a whole nother realm of artists moving in. So I don't know what to think about that. I don't know if you agree or no.
Do they or do they not bring forth gentrification?
No, I don't believe they do.
Okay, so tell us why.
Because Pilsen has always had an artist community here, even since when I remember.
Exactly. Okay.
And I think if you're to look at other neighborhoods, just think about like the North Halstead corridor. Think about that back in the the mid 80s.
Right.
How do you even remember what that area looked like back then? Because I do.
Well, tell us a little bit about it, Tommy. You went through there.
No. I mean, I
Used
as
to
a
hang out
teenager,
there.
I used to hang out there. It was hookers, transgender people. I mean, it was rough and tumble. I mean, and what made that neighborhood change was the gay population that moved into it and opening their gay businesses and doing all their things and creating those spaces. That's what brings forth, I think, gentrification.
So that's another kind of like stereotypical thing that they say of like the gay community.
Well, yeah, but Pilsen has
Right?
a huge gay population that is hidden because they don't open their businesses here. One of the reasons why is because there's the Latin community can be conservative in its thought process, like the older generation of. But yeah, there's a huge population of a gay community here, and I think that's originally what started gentrification for this area. There were these, because if you think about it, that's what starts gentrification. Men coming in who are not afraid to come into an area that's crazy.
Right. So usually it's like that's why this artist thing is so interesting for me, because they say like artists will move into like a worse neighborhood so they could have bigger space so that they could do like these are like stereotypes.
But it is funny because it is a stereotype.
It's like a stereotype. It's like terrible stereotype. So I want to like debunk it, or I want to like confirm it, or you're giving me kind of mixed messages.
Well, I think one of the reasons why is if you think about Pilsen in general, you have to remember what Old Man Podmajersky, right? He owned that little he kept buying those little sections near Old, which is a horrible term, but that's what they used to call it, Jewtown. Remember, it used to be burned out. There were nothing but abandoned buildings over there. That's where Old Maxwell Street was. I mean, you could buy socks, a gold chain, and porn, all in the same location.
Right.
And some tools.
And some tools.
And some tools every now and then, or pick up your old tools that got stolen. But yeah, I mean, like that area. There had always been, when I was a kid. So I was born in the 70s, right? So like so like that area when I was over there, because I lived in an Old Man Podmajersky property when I moved out of my house at 18. I just literally went down the street.
But your community was there. Is that why?
No.
Why did you choose to move there?
I chose to move there because there were several. There was a little enclave of a small gay community over there.
Right, that's what I just said. That you were comfortable because your community was there, and you felt comfortable.
And there were artists, right? I mean, you're talking about when you're talking about enclave, or you're just saying it was just like a small.
Yeah, there was a small enclave of, like little gay. There was like just these spots down there in the back. Before, when I was there, Old Man Podmajersky only owned those buildings, the burned out buildings. Like he owned those buildings, from where 18th Street makes the bend all the way to Canalport, and then he had those little areas and spots where the highway was. And then as people were like, so then the old families that were there, like a lot of the Mexican families that were over there didn't want to live so close to the expressway.
Right.
So they were selling them. And so he just started buying them up because people wanted out of that area and moved closer into this side as we got closer to Ashland, right? They just basically moved over into this area. And so that's how he started buying these buildings. And then he would make these weird, funky, I don't think code changes to them, right? Where, I mean, like my apartment had a fire escape as the staircase leading out. Leading from the upstairs to the downstairs, because it was kind of like lofted, and that's not up to code.
Right, a lot of those spaces were not up to code.
Weirdness. So that didn't help. That didn't create gentrification. There was always little artist enclave over there.
But there was an artist. So Pilsen's always had an artist community, and these are one of the things I want to clarify, right? Because people they tell us when they talk about Pilsen, outsider perspectives, they say, oh, that's where all the artists are moving, or that's where all the cool art is.
Yeah, well, in corporate America, what I hear a lot is what you're saying. That's how they see Pilsen from what I hear from folks. When they know I'm from Pilsen, that's usually the first thing I hear is like art. Oh, that's where the artists are, the great murals are. They have this perception and that it's really one of the biggest artist hubs is here, and like I said, it always has been. But I also think that a lot of our beautiful murals throughout time has made Pilsen actually a very attractive neighborhood and has brought in a lot of the new residents.
I think a certain kind of resident, but not the people who are buying. they're not coming here because
Of the artwork.
of the artwork.
Why are they proximity? I mean, we talked about, I think we're off air, but we were talking about proximity to downtown.
To downtown, yep.
Right.
But I think
And the other thing we're not even discussing, and I think you talked about it when you talked about Halstead and Maxwell Street, is that there was this development by the university, right? University Village. I remember that's when in the 90s we were really ramping up the gentrification discussion. That's when you actually saw like get out of Pilsen, gringos, kind of artists were creating that type of work in the 90s that I remember, maybe even in the 80s, but I think it's when University Village started that renovation, because that's completely, like you just said, completely different. It was abandoned before.
Well, yeah, but I think that if I remember correctly, which I might be wrong, but I do remember that the city pushed the university to purchase that plot of land where old Maxwell Street was. It wasn't meant to. I don't think that. So the university, a lot of that over there is a lot of the people who live in like University Village stay in University Village. Like that population there, I think, is what doctors, students, other people who are attached to the university. And I don't know anybody that I know. I mean, this is of course a gross generalization, but there are many people who walk through and come through and talk to us and stuff. And I ask, oh, where do you live in Pilsen? I don't know anybody that lives in University Village.
Well, I knew some people, and they were professional.
But were
and
they
it
attached to the university?
So they were not attached to the university. What I'm saying is that development was that was the first big development.
Yeah, Richard
that
Daley
came
wanted.
in.
Yeah, Daley pushed it hard. He wanted to develop these areas. He started off in the early 90s. I'm sorry, late 90s, where he really wanted to get more Latino areas, neighborhoods developed, and there was a lot of community fight back then. A lot of the activists, Juan Solis, Chuy Garcia used to be big against it. So there was a lot of activism against the creation of that, because people saw the writing on the wall, that was going to completely start changing the way.
Yeah, because I mean, I don't even consider University Village or even where it is as part
Right.
of Pilsen.
No, but I think it's like these circles of impact, right? Where now it's all these people that were, like you're saying, professionals. They were the professors. They were the doctors, maybe, that were working in the hospitals. I mean, these things are all very connected because of proximity.
But didn't the city also allot affordable housing in that area as well?
Oh,
See,
my
the problem,
goodness.
the thing with affordable housing is it's all
Well,
been.
it's a racket, of course.
Yeah.
No, but Javier, clarify that, because I
Yeah,
think that's
we had-
something that we're always say that there's a portion that's got to be allotted for affordable housing. Tell us, is it affordable, and do people that are being displaced actually get to move into these places?
No, it's all been a fib. It's always a way to calm down the activism, calm down the people from fighting back. I'm gonna give you an example. So I think if you want to build in Pilsen right now, you need to have 21% of those units, or 30%, one or the other, as affordable. But right now, it's what they have in lieu of fees.
Right.
Developers will easily, without a problem, pay the fee, and they always have, just to get out of it. It's not a lot of money at all. These fees are pennies for developers. Like the new development, I'm not a big fan of it, just because it's basically a bunch of small units, and I think they only had, like, out of those single units, they only had maybe like 7 family units. And I get it, maybe something is better than nothing, but
Well, compromise. We're always forced to compromise in some way.
But I think
You
that's
know?
the nature of everything in any sort of community project of any kind and anywhere, not just specifically in Pilsen. There always has to be compromise. No one will ever be happy. That's the nature of compromise.
Right, and that this is not only a complex issue, but this neighborhood is very complex, right? We deal with a lot of different things with with the the religious, the overly religious, the just so much goes on. There's still a lot of hatred and things that we see all the time in this neighborhood. We have the violence. I guess I don't know if we want to talk about.
I just wanted to touch on something before.
Okay, before we step into that.
Talking about this affordable housing and the in lieu of fees, I don't think that people talk enough about the fact that developers, whether it's a development company, a property management, or even real estate agencies, pushing certain properties on these buyers, and then they're having 5 to 10 buildings with 2 to 3 units in each. That's like a loophole, because that you're supposed to have affordable housing, or a certain percentage of your units, if it's more than 8 or 10 or something like that.
Yeah, above 7, I believe.
Above 7.
Yeah.
So I personally believe, and I don't think enough people talk about it, is that there's certain developers in Pilsen where they own a number of buildings, and if you add up all those units, you're talking about at least 20 units, and they don't even have to do the in lieu of fee. They don't have to provide the affordable housing. They've just, they have all their units in separate buildings, I don't think that's talked enough about. I think, I don't know who or what in the city or our aldermen or politics or what, but
there's a lot
you can't put a cap on how many buildings people could buy.
But what about families who have several buildings? Should they have to then do affordable housing as well? A mom and pop,
But it's not a mom and pop anymore if they own more than 5 buildings.
But if it's a family business and they've started it from one building and bought another building, are you saying that? So you're saying
we do have those.
What do you consider a developer then? So then that small family business would then be a developer then, right?
But it's not a small family business, right? Then they're in a different bracket.
But it's still a small family because they started buying one and going, So you're going to ding them for staying on task.
I think that's a good point. I'm not disagreeing with you on that point, because I have talked to owners.
Because I'm the first proponent to talk about, if we're talking about developers in Pilsen, you have to talk about the largest landowner in Pilsen. Do you know who it is?
Mm-mm.
It's the Resurrection Project.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They are the largest landowner in Pilsen, and they're the ones who are spiking up the prices in Pilsen.
Yeah.
Because when I was just even a few years ago, 3 years ago, when I wanted to buy in Pilsen, I was looking at 2 flats, and I was getting outbid by the Resurrection Project.
Mm-hmm.
So how is that? I'm from this neighborhood. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna drop.
But isn't that part of the problem, though, Tommy? That like our institutions have allowed this to happen.
No, I think that the neighborhood has allowed the Resurrection Project to grow out of control. I would think Resurrection Project's a bank now.
They are. They got their own bank.
So it's so why are we allowing them to grow exponentially unchecked? But I
don't think they're not going unchecked. There's plenty of people and groups that check
right.
on or try to.
They try to, but how are you going to check the Godfather of Pilsen? You know what I mean? Cool. So what? A developer comes in because he wants to buy something, right? And he's going to buy a small house that it's cheaper to knock it down and build, those ugly 3 condos, which I of course hate. They're all over Chicago.
Yeah.
I mean, but the reason why the price is going up is because it's so limited.
So
because Resurrection Project or any other big developer will come.
Well, there's 3 large landowners. You're saying if you're adding the Resurrection Project, you're talking about. We've already reviewed the Pod Majersky. What about home ownership? And I know Tommy's a big proponent of this because he's pushing us to buy our own home. He was priced out of the neighborhood, and we're trying to stay in the neighborhood. But what about that? Why aren't they helping? If they're a big organization here, why aren't they helping us purchase these buildings? Why aren't they?
think we
Why
should
haven't
ask
there
them.
been a
Well,
big?
because they're big business.
They're
just
okay.
Just because they're a 501c3 doesn't mean that they're not making money. They own. The reason, I think one of the reasons why gentrification is happening so quickly here, because I do agree that it's happening at a super fast pace from 3 years ago when I left to move to, and I purchased in the south side, further south.
Okay.
Just even within those in this 3-year time span,
Yeah.
how many properties has Resurrection Project purchased, and how many different people you see coming in, and it's becoming, and even just think about the housing stock now here in this area. It's almost something goes on the market and it's gone.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Because it's not just a developer, it's also other people wanting to come in. It's there's also I think we're also forgetting the second generation
it's from the big
Mexicans who grew up in this area, became college educated,
and want to come back. Right.
And they can afford to buy an $800,000 or $500,000 property.
Right. And I think that's why it's complex, right? That's why we're having this discussion.
If you would think about it, if we were to measure it in any way, shape, or form, to be very true, we would have to say that Teresa and Pablo are gentrifiers.
Oh.
Right?
Elaborate.
Yeah, please.
Because not
Explain.
not everyone
Explain.
could purchase a property at the price point in which you're purchasing already.
Wow.
So it's a 2-unit, right? So you would be considered already.
So once we buy them, we're part of the problem.
No, I think once you own,
Once we
you
own.
opened your business, you were already different than the normal people here in Pilsen.
So
Well.
opening
a gallery.
A gallery. Oh, we've had that
Yeah.
discussion.
So
Opening
opening
a
a gallery is
automatically
opening
removes
the
you.
flood, but isn't that opening the floodgate for gentrification? Having a gallery in this neighborhood,
But there's
making
always
it
been
something
galleries
cool.
in this neighborhood.
But see, one thing I want to add though is, and again, I think everybody has great points on this, but the mission that you guys had since even when you were on Damon was always, from what I've noticed, was create art and give struggling artists an opportunity to showcase their art, because that's one of the biggest issues that unfortunately artists we have is to showcase and to give back to the community. Of course, you still have to pay rent. Of course, you still have expenses. So we have to figure out a way to make ends meet. But I just think that the gallery here has been a way to give back. Now, there's some galleries that maybe not necessarily have that mission in mind. I feel like yous are more mission oriented.
Well, that's where I think in the very beginning, I don't want to say it was a mistake, but it was definitely a learning experience in that we were so adamant about it's going to be a gallery and it's going to be a for-profit business, right? Because we wanted to try to set this mission and example. But you're right. You have a gallery. We've had this discussion many times. It is a business. You need to sell art at a certain price point to survive. And we I don't like the word struggle, but maintaining it for as long as we did strictly as a gallery business model was not working for us, because we're so community oriented and just want to do everything, at low cost
generous,
for
and
free,
we never said no to anybody. And we had an artist model where it was like we gave the artist 60% versus 40. I mean, there's other things that we learned from that experience, but we did have a separate mission, and we're definitely unique people. Obviously, if you met us, you know this, but it's a different vision that we had. We wanted to give opportunity, but not to struggling artists necessarily, Javier, but just all artists in general, that were lacking these spaces. Because there's been galleries in the neighborhood, but they've promoted the same artists, and it's something that we see where there's this repetition where you feel comfortable with the same artists. And we've
I don't
always
think it's that they feel comfortable. I think it's that they're making money off of those artists. So.
Yes or no, because there's galleries that are open that don't make money, but they maybe own the building, which is great that they were able to get a building to begin with. So I think
But we've had to struggle with that question at some point over the years, is how do we contribute or how does our space contribute to gentrification, and what are we actively doing to skew that or turn it a different way? Because we want to make money to sustain our space and to hopefully pay ourselves at some point, but it's always like, it was a blessing in disguise, I guess, too, becoming the organization and the nonprofit, but we still have to do certain things and run, going back to the Resurrection Project, not that I'm like defending them or anything, but I think any successful organization has to have a factor element of different things, right? And like having a business component, we still sell artwork, we still have a retail part of it, but that's not the driving force anymore.
Well, we're in our infancy as an organization, but as as a business, and just maintaining a space for the community, I think that was very pricey. I think that's pricey, and a lot of people have sacrificed, and that's a labor of love, like they say. That's a cliche, but it's a labor of love.
I'm curious to ask Tommy, do you believe or feel that galleries are a component or bring gentrification? Because you've been a gallery owner for more than 10 years.
No, I don't. I don't think that at all. So this is the tough part, right? So I ask myself, when we talk about gentrification, what's the population we're literally talking about? The population that we're talking about that is getting moved out of Pilsen are the, people who are working really hard for their money. They're working trades, they're janitors, they're house cleaners, they're all these things.
It's working class people.
They're just working class people. But the thing is that, when we talk about the community, that's the community. I feel like my thing is that how Pilsen Arts and Community services the community by offering affordable classes and things like that. How many of those people actually take those classes? Because the problem is that I think that there's a division between what we would consider gentrification. Now, I know that there are starving artists, there are artists out there who are working to try and get, live on what they make, but that's also still considered a luxury, right? Because you have enough in order to live on. It's not like a whole family who they're working together just to keep the rent going. If you yourself as an artist can eke out any sort of living off of your work, I'm not saying it's huge or whatever, but it's still a luxury. That people who would consider being part of this neighborhood would be like, You're not me. You're not working you're not on your hands and knees scrubbing the floors. You're sitting there at a table making art, selling your stuff. So who are we actually? My thing is when we talk about gentrification, who are you actually talking about? And when you have an intellectual discussion about gentrification, you are almost already removed from the community because you have the luxury to think about it. Wow. Where these people, the people who are here who are getting displaced, they're worried about how they're paying the rent and how they're putting food on the table. So they don't care about the word gentrification. What they're thinking about is they're like, okay, if I'm going to move, I'm going to need to make sure that there's at least a train or something or a bus or something like that. They don't care about, this conversation
They don't care about the labels, and they don't care.
It's not about labels, but I'm saying that by having an intellectual discussion, by having this intellectual discussion about it, we are already not part of this community anymore.
R.I.P. Pilsen.
Wow.
I think we're going back to it. Do we need to take a break or anything?
If you think about it, right? So, you had the luxury of opening, you would not think of it as a luxury, right? But someone who's making $7.50 an hour scrubbing floors and has to do it for 80 hours to basically get anything, to put, clothes on their kids and do all those things. They're like, well, okay, you got it. You can open a business. Okay, you're not me. You don't understand me.
Right, but Tommy,
the conversation that we're having about is for them.
But I think.
Go ahead, Teresa. 'Cause I don't.
There is a gap. There is a bridge that I think just me personally, and I think us personally together, and what we've done is to try to bridge that gap of having those discussions and not having that intimidation of, people opening up our own gente opening up their own business. Because in our culture too, it's like, oh, mira, ese, they must be doing well because they opened up their business. But unless you continue to have conversations with your own community and are inviting and inclusive and making sure that you're, doing that, you won't have those discussions of like, I got a full-time job outside of this. You got a full-time job out of it. Like we all, as artists or creative people, most artists have some kind of regular gig, to help maintain. Like it's a number of things, right? But you're right. It is, what we think is a traditional working class type of job. Unless you're merging these worlds together, which I think that's part of our mission too, is merging these worlds together in our own community to start unraveling that,
And I think we do. Tommy, I think you'd be surprised of how many of these families, their children, that became artists because of the artists that were living here that they kind of looked up to and idolized. So it's maybe not the lady that's cleaning the houses or going downtown and working or working in the schools, right? But their kids. I mean, I think we're examples here where.
And it's not the majority either.
But it's not the majority, but it was like this influence.
Though that's what I'm trying to say.
It's a cultural thing too, where we're people are appreciating the artwork and the beauty of the artwork. We've always. We don't open the doors so that people from outside the neighborhood could come in here and look at artwork. We open the doors so that the neighbors in the community could come in and enjoy the artwork. And we bring in artists from outside of our community so that we could be shared.
Floors, or that that guy who's working on the street corner selling his wares.
They do stop in. They do.
Do they feel comfortable walking in?
Yes, they do.
I think some do, but I think no. You're right. Sometimes there's some that don't. I mean, we are lucky to have a nice window, and there's plenty of time.
Yeah.
You've seen me do it.
Yeah.
But
I'm
stop.
Come in.
They stop and they look at it, and I think that has an impact. And then when they take it home, they maybe have this discussion with like, oh, what's that place over here with their kid?
You wanna.
But do you think that they really have that discussion, or
they do? I think they do.
Or do they be like, oh, that's really, I love looking at that, and then just move on?
No.
But even if it's a move on moment, that's the moment. That's a moment.
That's a moment. That's art.
But as artists, we want to tell a story, right? That's what artists we want to do. We just want to tell a story, and
yes, and I agree with that 100%. But what I'm saying is that you have to also name your own hypocrisy, because you have the authority to give yourself the artist title, and that comes with having certain power that a lot of people who live in this neighborhood, who are just trying to make it every day, don't have that power.
Yeah, but
So it's like me. If you think about it, my family grew up dirt poor. Yeah. They worked. And as a unit together, they did it. They bought a building. Then they worked together and bought another one, and all of them barely got out of high school if they could. All of my cousins, which there are a gang of us, because traditional Mexican family, minimum of 4 kids, we went to college literally in the first generation. So they all came here, and then we were born here, and growing up in this neighborhood, as you've seen from me, like when people meet me, they automatically think that I'm not from here. Mm-hmm. Who are you? What are your qualifiers? What is this?
Right.
Which of course frustrates me.
I've seen it happen.
Which frustrates me, because if you're a brown person, if you're a Latino and you've given yourself the title of artist, then I'm going to treat you as such. But when I, as given the title of gallery owner, just because I own a gallery, then we've had this, right? When people ask, well, what's your qualifications? If you really want me to list my degrees, I'm going to yes, out-degree you all the time, because I was lucky to keep getting scholarships, to get free education.
Tommy worked the system, so I think right now we got to take a little bit of a break because we got to actually make a call because we got to do our phone a friend segment.
We got a phone a friend.
We are back and we are doing our phone a friend. We are trying to call Steve Vidal from Pilsen. My neighbor, he always gives us a heads up in the neighborhood Pilsen neighborhood page, which it's kind of like your app that I hate. But anyway, let's call him up, Steve Vidal.
The Citizen app.
Citizen app. We could go into that in another episode.
That's your favorite app, bro.
Hello, Steve.
Hello.
You're here with Pablo, Teresa, Javier, and Tommy J. Reyes. You're on the Pilsen podcast, videocast.
Okay.
Surprise.
I don't know if Teresa wants to. So a little history. I think Steve, we worked on in the past through the Pilsen Open Studios. He's been, an incredible help. Like one of the few volunteers that we could count on year in and year out. But you want to, Teresa, I think.
Yeah, thank you for taking our call, Steve. We've been trying to phone a friend for our segment. And this episode, we are talking about gentrification. And all of us being Pilsen raised, Chicago raised, we all have experienced this, especially in our neighborhood. And with you being an artist as well, an art teacher at Benito, Juarez, we actually had a discussion about the high school as well. We thought, hey, let's call Steve and ask him a couple questions and see what you have to think about it, or hear what you have to think about it. So, Pablo, you had a specific question?
Is gentrification a 4-letter word? No. The question. Go ahead, Steve. Why don't you just start with that?
Well, is that the question? Is gentrification a 4-letter word?
It's gentrification. We've decided is a dirty word we all have to get used to saying and be comfortable saying it so we can talk about it.
Yeah, and I guess the makeshift title is R.I.P. Pilsen.
Yeah. Is it bad for Pilsen?
Was it bad for Pilsen?
You know what? It's just interesting. I've had this conversation with various friends, family members, acquaintances, students, parents, and members of different community-based organizations and groups about gentrification and its impact in Pilsen. On the one hand, it has definitely caused a shift, a dramatic and obvious shift in the demographics in the community, right? With thousands of Latino, Mexicano families leaving or forced to leave because of the ever increasing rent and property taxes throughout the community, and developers coming in and building new housing stock that is not really aimed at the traditional working class Mexicano families that have called Pilsen home for decades. So that's definitely been a dramatic impact, and I think everyone can agree that that's still ongoing. And my biggest frustration as a resident, as an educator, as a lifelong Pilseño, there isn't really an easy answer as to how we can attack that problem. It's an issue of economics. It's an issue of people having different aspirations, like as far as when our relatives that came here back in the 60s and 70s and decided to come to Chicago. What were the reasons why they came here, right? And then everybody seems to want to aspire to have their own home, a big backyard. But when you look at the housing stock in Pilsen, it really doesn't. It wasn't constructed originally to meet the needs of single families, right? On the other hand, some I've heard people make the comment that the one area where you can see that and again, this is somebody who born and raised in Pilsen and lived through some of the roughest times of the neighborhood. I don't want people to misinterpret what I'm about to say, but is the impact that gentrification had in the community that some would say is on the positive side is that it has impacted the presence of street gangs. Now, what I want to say that I want to preface is that you look at back in 1980, right? This is documented and it's been researched. There were 21 known and identified street gangs in Pilsen in 1980. Fast forward to 2021, we have nowhere near that number of street gangs. Okay, we had graffiti, we had over 40 or 50 liquor establishments throughout the community. Now there are a handful. That in of itself has been a shift, and I would argue that in some ways it has kind of become a little more peaceful. That's not to say that the neighborhood is free of crime, by no means. But the influx of people coming in with money and developers building this new housing stock has really forced a lot of families, even those that were just hell bent on raising problems and causing issues and conflicts, because of what they were about. You don't have that presence. You don't see that visible presence of that street element as much. Again, not to say that it's completely gone, because it isn't.
Right.
But my struggle is, and again, it's a complex situation, right? Man, I wish these changes that have been brought about by gentrification could have been experienced by those families. That when I was growing up, all my family wanted was a block that was peaceful. Parents didn't want to be afraid of having the kids playing in front of the home without the concern of being shot, because gangs were shooting each other from corner to corner. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And look at the elementary schools. Now, this is me as an educator. Look at the elementary schools in the neighborhood now. All of them have reinvented themselves. They're either STEM, IB, magnet. Now we have a gifted program. How come that didn't come about 25 to 30 years ago when it was predominantly Mexican Latino?
Exactly.
Can you? We talked about this earlier before we called you. Can you talk a little bit about the demographic at Benito Juarez right now, as far as the students? And I know you and I have talked about that in the past, like students being from specifically Pilsen or coming in from other neighborhoods because it is an IB school now.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I was talking about that with a friend of mine. This school, as far as race, is still predominantly Latino Mexican. However, where the difference is, it lies in the neighborhood or neighborhoods where the kids come from. Mm-hmm. When I started teaching at Juarez in August of 2000, over 95 to 98% of the student body was from Pilsen. It was really a sight to see when you have waves of students walking from as far as west as Western Avenue, or as far east as Canal Port, as far north as 17th Street, and so forth and so on. Waves walking towards the school, because Benito Juarez was the school. Mind you, Benito Juarez was the first public high school that opened in Pilsen. Way before Cristo Rey, way before Noble Schools, way before Ishka, way before any of these other schools that existed. So Pilsen, Juarez was truly a Pilsen school.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward to today, 2021, the vast majority of the student body is not from Pilsen. We have kids that are from all over the city. And what's interesting, and I know this, again, being an educator and still working at Juarez, this isn't only a problem specific to the Pilsen. But what is really fascinating is that because the school opened new programs, the ID program and academies and specialized programs that appeal to many students, we have been saved. We have been very fortunate to count on a very strong number of student enrollment.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, we have a student body number of 1,700 students.
Mm-hmm.
When you if you look at Tilden, Gage Park, Richard, Wells, Roberto Clemente, Farragut, or schools like that, they're struggling with anywhere from 200 to 500 students max. People don't know this, but Kelly High School has a higher number of students, but they got hit when the Noble opened up the back of the yard, and they're going to see a dramatic drop in their Asian student enrollment because the CPS already approved the construction of a selective enrollment college prep high school in Chinatown.
Okay.
Juarez is still in a very good position to continue drawing these big numbers. And that makes me really happy. I mean, we still have great programs, but we don't have that strong representation exclusively from Pilsen anymore. We lost that already, and I don't see that.
Do you think that just basically goes back to families being priced out of the neighborhood and
Yeah, I had to. Yes, I got involved with the CRP Coalition Housing Coalition because I was so disappointed and upset to see the number of students that would come to my classroom crying because they used to live 2 blocks away from Juarez, 3 blocks away from Juarez, across the street from Juarez. Suddenly, from one day to another, the new owner was like, all right, I just bought the property, you got to get out of here now.
Mm-hmm.
And on a drop of, they were forced out. Now they're taking 2 buses to come here because now they live on 51st, 71st, 89th, and they're traveling long distances to come to our school.
Yeah, they're moving.
That was.
A lot of these families are moving to the 16th ward of the city, or they're going as far as the suburbs, Aurora, Joliet.
Oh yeah.
A lot of these, because it's just cheaper over there, of course, right? They could afford to actually buy a home over there in that area.
Pablo, you're absolutely right. I know students firsthand that live in Inglewood, in Chatham, in the Austin neighborhood, North Lawndale. And that's really interesting and fascinating at the same time because I'm from a older generation. Back then, there was no way in hell that you were going to be living in those neighborhoods because the race politics in Chicago were what they were. You can't sugarcoat that. It was what it was. If you weren't of a specific race or background, you were going to have a really difficult time, if not an impossible time, living in those neighborhoods. That's just a fact. Today, the lack of affordable housing, has actually forced Latinos and people from Pilsen to move into those areas because that's where the most affordable and cheapest housing stock is available at the time. These are neighborhoods that are, in need of its development and investment. And it really, man, it's fascinating. I don't know. I haven't heard of anyone actually conducting a study or research on how the lack of affordable housing and gentrification is actually pushing people of different races and ethnicities and backgrounds to live together. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And but I do know students who've shared many interesting stories about them moving into Inglewood and Chatham and the Austin neighborhood because they were forced out of Pilsen.
Well,
I think Tommy has a question for you, Steve. Hold on.
So, what? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So my thing with Juarez offering these additional programs, don't you think that also is a big proponent of gentrification because families who are coming from all over the city are seeing the area and wanting to come in because it's closer for their kids. Because I mean, the IB program or magnet programs, like if we think about like Inglewood STEM, right? So it's a neighborhood school, but it also has a magnet program. So those kids are getting bused in, and there's a division between what the neighborhood kids can actually take. They don't get access to all of the programming. Is that the same in Juarez, where there's a division between if you live in the neighborhood, you can go to Juarez, but if you test into the advanced programming, you get additional services.
Yeah,
so it's still a
clarify
divide,
that for us, Steve.
if I'm correct.
Yeah.
Because I also work for CPS as well. So.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting. As far as I know, the IB programs all across the city, they students have to meet the criteria, right? We are not a wall-to-wall IB school. Let me preface that. We're not a wall-to-wall IB. We have different programs. It's interesting because we're embarking upon an initiative to what's the term I'm trying to think right now. I'm pardon me. I'm gonna blank right now. I'm thinking it's an initiative that they're embarking upon for the next school year, where we're basically going to do away with categories. It's a big push right now for CPS. It's
there aren't all these divisions? Because I know when I was looking at going into high school.
Called D-tracking, Pablo.
D-tracking? Okay. So when I was trying to go to school, right, I was at Lincoln Park. That was the first high school I went to, and they had the IB. I think that was one of the only. There was two in the city. Right. I think it was Lab and Lincoln Park were IB, and then I was in the math and science because I just was not nerdy enough to be in the IB program. But the math and science was a pretty good program. But then there was like the regular track, I guess. What you're saying they're doing away with these kinds of tracking systems?
Yes, this is a new initiative where all of the faculty and staff is starting to receive training. I'm still learning more information about it, but the idea is to do away with the tracking system.
Are you talking about kids? About the kids training? Is that what you're talking about for CPS?
In other words, when students are accepted into the school, they're placed in a category. Either you're honored, IC, an academy, so forth. So they're trying to do away with those categories. So, and there's a way to create more equity, if you may. Students don't think of themselves, I might be some better than you because you're
right. It creates more divisions amongst the students, and I remember that I felt that way when I was going to school. So that's good that they're trying to remove those.
Yeah, that happened to me when I was at St. Rita. Actually, I went there 1 year, and they did the same thing with me.
Right.
Excuse me. That's why they're trying to push that. Again, I can't speak more about it because I'm learning as I go. Because I just wanted to share that with you. As people are thinking about, the specialized program that we have, there's now this new shift that's going to take place at our school, and all of us, and so again, we're receiving training. We're going to continue learning more about that during the summer in preparation for the fall when this initiative is supposed to take place. Going back to the question about how is this program or any of those specialized programs or specialty programs offered at a school, how does that impact our ability to recruit students? Well, it definitely, in all honesty, the system has been like that. The system has always, and this is something I've been very critical of, the system has always pitted one school against the other. It's like there's always been that sense of competition, right, from the onset. One neighborhood against the other, kind of like little gang rivalry comes out, even in sports and even academics. In order to feel better about ourselves, we have to put the other school down. And that's been very problematic, I think. And I'll be honest with you, when I started off as a teacher, I was caught up in that because, that was just a mindset, even from a sports, an academic competitive mindset. But when I started working in the community as an artist and in social services, I started thinking, wait a minute, it's really doing us a lot more harm, because at the end of the day, those are Paisanos, Latinos in that community like us, and we gain nothing from putting that school down just so that we could make ourselves look bigger and better and sound like we have it all together. You know what I mean? And so, I hope that these other schools that I mentioned, like the Tilgans, like the Richards, like the Gage Parks, and so forth and so on, can also receive support and also receive the necessary tools to offer, better opportunities, more opportunities, and support your teachers at the school, because those communities are also in need, right? Take, for example, a lot of our families who left Pilsen have also moved into back of the yard. And, now there's another high school, there's the back of the yard college prep, right? They compete with Tilden. And so, I hope, in so many ways, when I look at back of the yard, so I want to take a drive down there, it brings me back memories of what Pilsen was back in the 1950s, with like a population of people living in very cramped spaces, numerous family members, extended family members living in these buildings. And of course, you've got the other issues. You've got a lot of social ills going on, a lot of poverty, substance abuse, and of course, gang presence. But nevertheless, there's some fantastic schools. We've had great success with students coming from some of those grammar schools. In fact, we have a good number of students coming from grammar schools in back of the year, some of the Juarez who have graduated and gone on and some great things. But I don't know. I think that having the programs that we have, it just, goes to show that we've come a long way. Juarez has always built programs as a great opportunity. It just has been overshadowed by a range of things, either internal politics, bureaucracy issues, and sometimes not doing a better job of communicating, like PR marketing, if you may. Mm-hmm. I think we've done a much, much better job nowadays. Students and families are starting to identify that we do have lots of resources and support for the kids that come to our school. Is that the same in every high school? Absolutely not. And I think that's also indicative of the flaws and the inequities that exist in such a large bureaucracy like CPS.
Yeah, I'm curious to see when the final census numbers come up with this year, where the Mexican population is going to be here in Pilsen. If you go back to the census in 2010, we lost 10,000.
Javier's looking at the stats right now.
Yeah, we lost 10,000 Mexican residents in Pilsen, and the number should be out hopefully by, what I'm hearing is by May or so, we're going to get the final census numbers. Now, last year was our census time, and the response rate wasn't the best, unfortunately, because of COVID and other reasons. I think Pilsen barely had over 45% response on their census. Which is unfortunate, right? Because then we lose a lot of resources and federal funding that could have came to our community and helped our folks. But yeah, I'm just really curious to see how these census numbers are going to look.
What's interesting about it, because I used to be involved in the St. Pius Parish, Catholic Parish. Attended Graduate Holy Trinity Grammar School on Troop between 18th Place and 19th Street. Now, Alderman Seeker uses what used to be the church as a community center to distribute things and goods and services to the community, which is awesome. Since the church closed down and stopped hosting mass in 1991. And I say what's interesting in Pilsen is this. I kind of saw this, and a lot of us old schoolers kind of saw what's happening today. We saw this happening 30 years ago. When the archdiocese shut down the Department of Latino Affairs, they had an office that that was focusing on Latino outreach. They shut that down. Move over to today. Fast forward to today. The Catholic parishes in Pilsen are just a skeleton. They're just basically just a faint memory of what they once were.
Yeah.
When the Resurrection Project started, when it was founded by the Catholic churches in the neighborhood. And the bully pulpit was a space where both the priests and people from the organization to go out there and inform people about different things that were going on. There was no reason. I mean, the Pilsen had many, nonprofit organizations. It's no wonder why Paulo Lindsay was doing work in Pilsen. So I've been very active and community active and organizer. And fast forward to today, the churches have been shut down. There's, people ask me what's going to happen with Candid. I says, you know what? If Candid, the structure itself, the church structure is saved, I'll bet any money it's never going to host mass again because it's not.
Right.
We're very few. Dallas isn't about people. The traditional person is not living in the barrio. You know what I mean? It's like, well, what are you going to do with that space? How do you create? How can you reinvent that space to be useful to meet the needs of the community?
Yeah,
exactly. So, Steve, we're gonna let you go because we're already way over time. But thank you for the conversation. We're gonna invite you into one of these Pilsen pods so we could see you in person and we could share these great stories with you. Another Pilseño, as you said.
We would love to have you here in person, definitely, brother. Very good conversation.
All right.
Thank you, Steve, for your time.
Thank you. Gracias.
PilsenPod.